Hey everyone! Welcome back to GraveyardDance.com. Today, we'll be doing a story about a good friend of mine with whom I have known for over half my life. She's a big fan of our channel and graciously volunteered to tell her story. We will however be doing something a little different this week. To protect her identity, and you'll soon learn why, we won't be using her personal or family photos in this week's story. We hope it will help future people from making the same mistakes she made. Many years ago in the late 90s or early 2000s, as most of you who are over 35 would know, there used to be a social media platform called MySpace, which was a place that many still argue that was better than Facebook. It was similar in a lot of ways, and it was a great way to meet people. I've met many of some of my best friends on there with whom I still stay in constant contact with. It was also a place where you could meet some of the worst of humanity. That's exactly what happened to Jane Smith. Not her real name, but for safety's sake, that's what we'll call her for this video. Jane was a 27-year-old mother of two beautiful little girls who's 7 and 10 years old. Jane had just came out of a divorce and had gotten not only custody of her girls, but a huge home in the settlement which was just about 4 miles outside of town in the country. It was a beautiful home that sat up nestled in the trees bordering the woods and was somewhat secluded. Jane only had neighbors which was on the left side of her house. A couple who were in their mid-40s who were both over-the-road truck drivers, so for the most part, Jane had the area all to herself for her and her kids. She didn't mind, because she liked the quiet and privacy. Still, she craved companionship and missed having friends around. Another thing she missed was male attention. It had been a long time since she had even been on a date. She was updating her profile and she put a check next to the box that said, "Single and looking." For most of the ladies out there, you probably can imagine the feeding frenzy from eligible single men that created. Although she had given birth to 2 children, Jane was a very sexy and beautiful girl. She had beautiful long blonde hair that hung to the middle of her back, a thin petite frame and was barely 120 pounds at 5 foot 3 inches tall and had beautiful green eyes. She was so pretty in her online photos, that a lot of people wouldn't even think they were real except for the fact that she had photos of her children in most of her online pictures. You could tell she was a great mother because of how happy her and her kids were in all the pics. They were obviously all very loved and taken care of. She had photos of the kids at their school and with photos of her wearing the school's mascot and logo in many of them. She was the type of woman who loved her community and was proud to show her support for it and for her kids. As we mentioned though, Jane was a lonely girl when it came to men. I remember her mentioning to me once back then that she never got asked out very often because a lot of guys were intimidated by her. I've known guys who wanted to ask her out, but they said she was too pretty and that they didn't feel they stood a chance of being accepted. If only they had known her though. She had a huge caring heart and once you got past the superficial aspect of it, she was one of the most down-to-earth and friendly girls anyone could ever meet. She never met a stranger and no matter who it was, she treated everyone with kindness and respect. One of the only flaws she had was she was too trusting of people she would just meet. One of those guys was a guy named Joe. Joe was about 10 years older than Jane, but he had seen her profile come up on MySpace and he decided to add her. Joe lived about 50 miles away, but after talking every day for about a month, he offered to drive to meet her. Jane loved the idea and offered to get a babysitter, but Joe offered to allow her to bring the kids on the date. Although she thought it was sweet, she didn't want her girls meeting every guy she went out with. The night they were to meet, Jane had her mother watch the kids and went on to get all dressed up for her first date with Joe. She was excited about it. Would he be as cute in person as he was online? Was he tall? Or would he be as nice as he was on MySpace? She couldn't wait to find out. After showering and getting her clothes and makeup on, she made her way to the cafe where they were supposed to meet. The only thing, Joe was a no-show. They had agreed to meet at 2 that afternoon. She had worn a bright red top and had told her where she would be sitting and what she would be wearing, but after waiting around for over an hour, he never showed up. She was disappointed, but shrugged it off and went home after picking up the girls from her mom's house. She went home and tried to call Joe, but there was no answer. She cooked supper for the girls and got them bathed and ready for bed and went to sleep herself early that night. At around 2 in the morning, she thought she heard a car pull up, but was about half asleep and just thought maybe she was dreaming and drifted off to sleep. Unfortunately for her though, she was not. It was Joe. He had been knocking on the door, which woke her up, but she wasn't about to answer it. She thought it was very weird that he would be at her house because not only was it 2 in the morning, she had also never told her where she lived. As he pounded on the door, he had seen the light come on in her room upstairs. He knew for a fact she was awake, and even after him yelling up to her to answer the door, no answer came, which angered him even more. He walked back to his truck and pulled out an axe which she saw from her window, and it scared her half to death. What was he going to do with it? She immediately started to dial 911 and told them what was happening. The problem was that she lived far out of town in a location that was very hard to find. In those days, they didn't have the types of GPS systems they have now or Google Maps. Police actually had to know the areas that they lived in, and the officer on duty that night did not. All of a sudden she started hearing Joe attacking her door with the axe. He was actually trying to chop up her door to get in. This was insane. Joe had just about gotten the door completely chopped up enough to make his way inside her home, but was grabbed from behind by someone he didn't even know was there. A very big, 6'4" truck driver who lived next door and who wasn't happy about the fact that someone was trying to hurt his neighbors. He had just come home at the exact right time to save Jane and her kids. He took the axe away from Joe and threw it to the ground. For the next several minutes until the police arrived, Jane's very big truck driver neighbor taught lessons to Joe that he definitely needed to learn that night. Let's just say that after it was all said and done, Joe looked worse than the door he tried to destroy. The police came as well as an ambulance to take him away. Old Joe wouldn't be back around anytime soon. That's when the real horror of what happened started to sink in. In the following days, after intense questioning by police, Jane found out how Joe had found her and why he had stood her up that day and what his real intentions actually were. As it turned out, Joe had been released from prison recently for something we can't really talk about on here without getting our video demonetized or removed. Let's just say that Jane wasn't who he was really after, if you know what we mean. He had been arrested and convicted on sickening crimes against children and was a level 3 offender. You can't get much worse than that. He would later claim that the reason he clicked on her photos to begin with or had her on social media was not because of her beauty, but instead because he spotted her kids in her default photo. That's when he added her and started talking to her. Just about everything he had told her was a lie. He lied about his last name, his job, his past, and made it sound like he was just this amazing guy who wanted a family, which is why he claimed that the kids could come on a date with him. What he actually had planned was much more dark and sinister. When he had gotten out on parole, he was not supposed to even be online or talking to any kids, which is rules he broke almost immediately. Not only that, but he scoured her profile for clues about where to find Jane and the kids. He saw a photo of a bank calendar in one of her photos which gave him where she banked. He saw photos of her with a shirt on that had her kids' school as well as them in their gym at school, which also showed their team mascot and town name. He saw what kind of car she drove in other pics as well as her home in the background. It didn't take long to locate exactly where she lived. His plans were to break in and harm her to take the kids, but luckily for her, her very big, very rough and masculine neighbor showed up just in the nick of time. Who knows what would happen had he not gotten home right when he did. In the years since, Jane has deleted her social media pages and has been a lot more selective of who she meets or talks to. She finally married someone. Remember the married guy next door who saved her? He ended up getting a divorce about a year later and ended up asking her out, and now they have been a happily married couple for many years now. Jane and the kids ended up with a happy ending after all. After hearing her story, it made me think about my own safety and that of my family. I took a lot of personal info off my profile, such as city, and I only have a couple of photos on mine, and they are nothing that can give away any information at all. Jane and I ended up taking self-defense classes as well as kickboxing and other self-defense training that I can't mention here. Let's just say that if we ever need to defend ourselves in any situation, we're more than prepared. Jane did end up selling her home and they ended up moving to another state, but we stay in touch. We hope that if you know anyone who could be making the same types of mistakes Jane did, that they can watch this video and learn what to do and what not to do on social media or in life in general. It's a sick and disgusting time we live in where it's dangerous to trust people in general. She says that today, she is much more hyper aware of stranger danger. She says that today, she even locks her car doors immediately as soon as she gets inside her car. She now has a guard dog and security system and a door strong enough to repel axe blows. If you do end up meeting anyone online, just please be careful. Don't take everyone at their word, and there are websites where you can do a check on someone for only $1 or $2, that is providing they are using their real name. Have you ever had anything like this happen or meet someone who wasn't what you expect? We'd love to hear about it in the comments section below. Don't forget to check out our merch and hit the subscribe button if you will. The more subscribers we have, and views, the more our videos get shared, so help a mom out please and thank you. We hope you got something from this week's story. Till next time!